corolário à fala do Otávio. Só para lembrar que nós temos um laboratório não autodeclarado como tal, mas de fato está acontecendo, muito experimental, que envolve escrita colaborativa, novo gênero de escrita etnográfica, antropológica, que só saber que eu chamo de um laboratório não declarado e incipiente, que temos também aqui no PPH, do trabalho de dissertações e teses de alguns indígenas. Eu tenho uma experiência já bastante razoável e é uma experiência, no bom sentido, devastadora. Porque é uma escrita que, de fato, é intensamente colaborativa entre o orientador e o orientando. É um tipo de produção que é reflexiva. Pelo menos eu não conheço nenhum desses alunos, nem aqui como em outras pós-graduações, ou outras graduações, ou diálogos indígenas, em que eles não produzem alguma coisa sobre o outro. Né? É um tipo de antropologia reflexiva, de autoantropologia, mas que passa necessariamente por outros. Então é uma experimentação bastante radical, sobre a qual temos que refletir, pensar, escrever, porque já temos uma experiência acumulada, breve, mas já importante, e que eu acho que é um laboratório de experimentação de escrita etnográfica absolutamente, no seu sentido, revolucionário, né? E politicamente impactante sobre a nossa própria prática, a nossa própria história, o nosso próprio desenvolvimento. Então, só para chamar a atenção como um adendo a alguns pontos fundamentais da fala do Otávio, e para o George Marcos saber desse laboratório firme em andamento aqui no Brasil. Não deve ser só no Brasil, mas eu acho que nós temos bastante coisas interessantes a dizer sobre as consequências, né, desse experimento.
We're going to make 3 questions, then you make comments.
Okay.
Por favor, vem aqui. It was not a question. It was not a question, but a comment. This is the first one. So
like
you got
could
it.
a laboratory exist?
Se fala quem você.
Good morning. Hi, George, can I make my question in English?
Oh, thank
Yes, is that okay? Hi, my name is Vanessa. I'm a PhD candidate at Federal University here in Rio. And, well, since you're here, I'd like to make you a question. This is good. Okay, sorry. So, in the book Writing Culture, which I haven't read, but I just had the opportunity to take a look right now. There's an article of yours regarding thoughts about ethnography in the modern world system. And the book was published in '86. So after this, you developed another, also really interesting book and theory regarding the work of the anthropologist towards the integration of the micro and macro spheres, which you called the multi-sited ethnography, which you also mentioned in your talk today. And I would please like you to talk a little bit more about it and about the process of developing the theory along the years that came after the book Writing Culture. Thank you very much.
Agora é a terceira questão. Você se apresenta.
Boa tarde. Eu sou Priscila, eu sou estudante de mestrado na UERJ em design no laboratório que chama LADA, né, e nós estudamos, entre nossas pesquisas, o que nos une é o laboratório de design e antropologia, o LADA. E nós, como fazemos parte da pesquisa em design, escutamos muitas críticas dentro do nosso próprio grupo de designers, quando a gente vai falar da aproximação do design da antropologia. E uma das principais críticas a respeito da produção, da colaboração, né, do que surge da colaboração entre designers e grupos sociais. Mas acho que uma crítica que particularmente me toca é que nós somos não acusados, mas assim, o que nós produzimos não necessariamente está ligado ao campo do designer. E qual seria, o que nós fazemos sociologia, né? E eu queria saber se existe dentro dos seus grupos de pesquisa alguma crítica a esse tipo qual é o fruto da conexão entre design e antropologia?
What's the fruit of design antropology?
The fruit.
What were the consequences of the collaboration between design and anthropology? Because she's a designer and she's accused by people that she's an anthropologist.
Not doing design, she's not doing
because
design.
Oh,
they're the worst.
Wow, these are just the kind of questions I hope I would get, but I'm a little overwhelmed by them because these are the key questions, not the things I spoke to you about because they're more or less settled in the kind of thinking I did, but the questions you raised are the unsettled things. So what popped up to me is some of, when you asked these questions, what occurred to me were some of the things in the middle paper that I didn't read you because I didn't want to go on too long. But let me try to deal with the relevant points of those papers, and it has to do with the legitimation of anthropology, that it has enjoyed in the past. It may be in a little trouble now, but it is still the legitimation, the authority of the field that you don't want to give up easily by trying something new. The idea, what people who succeed in anthropology, younger people, in this era, are seeming to do with the work that they have done, different from what those who preceded them in the academia did. These are some of the questions at stake. And then, what's in it for the designers? Depends on, sorry for this screech, who you're working with. But these are really good questions. If I missed any points, come back to them. What's that say? Oh, design lab.
Yeah,
and accused of being
sociologists.
Well, that's all right. So is there sociologists who are friendly to what we're doing? I mean, there is a real shift of disciplinary boundaries going on. You might sort of say that's always going on. But I would argue that because of technological changes and just the reorientations of people, that the old categories of the social sciences are being redefined, but not authoritatively. So you have to work with that. And there aren't very powerful answers to why, this remains definitively anthropology unless you work with a particular sort of subject. And then it is anthropology. But that's a very weak way, historically a strong way to define a discipline in certain periods, but historically, over time, a kind of weak way, particularly given all the things that anthropologists, in their tradition of how they ask questions, have become interested in. So I find that in still big anthropological profession in the United States, there's room for people to actually legitimate and create slippages from studying marginalized peoples, really. Differently integrated into major systems, and also studying disease and processes of science and a variety of other things. And I would imagine that if we think of anthropology now more as world anthropology, which I don't think is just a fantasy, that it's also easier to do that in anthropologies and other places. It depends on what its local legitimations are. So I would imagine in certain places, which Argentina or something, I don't know, which only justified anthropology in terms of a certain kind of Argentine nation, that within the modernization of the university, however far it's developed, that arguments about global issues or are increasingly more important in how you can slip your interests from one to another and only have kind of local catfights, if you want, with other disciplines, which really, I understand for someone trying to make careers, they do matter, but from a certain point of view, don't matter at all. I do think the broader framework in which anthropology can define itself does not depend on the local establishment of disciplines, because they too are changing. But individual outcomes and how lucky or not you are professionally can vary. But I think the overall situation is vastly different. And those who hold on to a kind of old view of anthropology are out of touch with the flow where things are going. On the other hand, I don't mean that things they may be talking about may be perfectly fascinating and interesting. You can say the same for other fields like history. But that was just ideology. What I wanted to say was that where I get my empirical knowledge of this is that we get very good graduate students from all over the world in our graduate program. And I teach a course in ethnography. And what we read are ethnographies. But over the time I've been teaching this course, what students select to read, what significance they make of ethnography within their, formation has changed tremendously. So most of what I know of the role of ethnography, not just the fact you have to write one or you have to be engaged in the actual practice of it, is to be defined as an anthropologist, its standing has changed tremendously. It was quite strong in the writing culture days because a lot of critical ideas and theory possibilities were delivered through that discussion, the writing culture discussion. That is not so much true anymore. I think that people have very pragmatic views that to get certain kinds of grants to operate within the acceptance of how the discipline is defined in various places, that they very much think about first works and later work. That often you are doing your first ethnography or ethnographic research for the production of a dissertation. And this tends to be a more disciplined exercise than what you might do on your own as a writer, writing ethnography, or what you might have the freedom to do later, or what you might do in the post-doctoral period. And I find that many people today anticipate or have ambitions for other kinds of production of their work. Now, you might think, oh, well, this means that they're really poets or fiction writers, or that they see that this ethnography could work very well as a play or something. And that could be, and that's one of the enjoyments of kind of producing ethnography, but you're not doing it, right? You're doing something else within a discipline. However, I do think that the nature, and what was very clear from the writing culture period, was that books, ethnographies that had a certain writerly character were not produced as ethnographies, that there was a huge space between whatever their research reports look like, their rite de passage look like, and what they later produced. So I think that the idea, I've always been interested in second and third projects, at least in the United States, by anthropologists, because they're so different than just a logical continuation of what they did in the first project. But I think this has actually become a much more important perspective to take in thinking about your work. I would only cite here, and I use now in my course, this wonderful French work by Victor Debinet. They published it in English on Far Afield, where he takes a long view of not French anthropology, but of writing in French anthropology, answering the question of how can we have an elementary structures and a tres tropique. And that's not unusual. You have many French anthropologists who are writing in a science mode and in the mode of letters. And this has a deep history in French anthropology. I found it great to read because I found it true in a lot of different national traditions of anthropological writing. There is a kind of very effective, legitimated poetics that is produced. Not bad novels or the kind of poetry that I can do, but a more, what should I sort of say, a more experimental understanding of the kind of problems that drove people into the field of anthropology originally. So I think the whole experimental aspect emerges as a natural evolution of careers and of how anthropologists collectively think. So it's already there. It's not something like, let's kick out positivism or the pretensions of science. It's a built-in it's built into the way, the history of anthropology in many places, and my guess is of Brazil also. But maybe, perhaps, the story is a little different than the one in France or the one I'm interested in. So that's one thing. Is this about a laboratory exist?
Yeah, it's a research institution, a research research institution that was inside.
That's about the first
Like,
question.
yes.
Yes,
Like
because she's telling that now we have here Indian students that are producing their own writing.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's a collaborative writing between the student and the supervisor. And she's saying that it's something new here, and it's a kind of writing.
That would be the writing between the student in the anthropology department or another program?
Anthropology department.
That would be, this actual fact, social fact, would be a fantastic basis on which to engineer or imagine a laboratory. And I'm not sure how the relations, they would obviously be sensitive to some degree because of the nature of race and difference in the society and the long colonial and post-colonial histories. But these actually, I think anthropology, after the sweat of theoretical discourse, et cetera, is in a fine place now to manage that kind of discourse, which could lead to such a laboratory. Just let me say briefly that there was the history I was involved. I could see through the 2000s when I came to the University of California, Irvine, that laboratories, experimental forms would be an important future of anthropology. And I tried to create an institute which looked at the most interesting projects going on. Those happen to be, these are not activist projects or the role of anthropologists in ethnic and Indian movements. But these were anthropologists who were increasingly involved in science projects or who were using new and media technology to somehow imagine collaboration. And by far, how much they actually accomplished is one question. I won't go into it. There's a short history of that could be written. But they had the intellectual capital because they were thinking about collaboration in a different technology. And there's been, in the center, we've continued to follow that. And it's been an extremely interesting development. The book, so I was thinking about this through the 2000s. I had these conversations with Paul Rabineau. We wrote this book of conversations called Contemporary Designs for the Contemporary of Anthropology. I mean, it was appreciated for the moment. Now, Rabineau went on to create this very elaborate lab at Berkeley called ARC. And it was funded well, it had beautiful graphics. I sort of plunged, I did not have the vision that he had. His fell apart, and he's written like 3 books since 2012 on how everything fell apart, but was still valuable in its decline. And I thought that was kind of fascinating. See, he had a view of art which was a reproduction of the French lab. It was basically he and his students going out and doing field work. Field work still existed. He had a different vocabulary for it. And would bring it back, and they would create maybe the mythical, collaborative, comparative laboratory. In beginning, there were like postmodern notions to it, but in his take on it was a very French idea for a lab, etc. My idea was if you had people going out and doing field work, that eventually, given these days and with identity movements and everything else, the drama of establishing a lab would be its gradual self-destruction by the outside coming inside and essentially creating what you seem to already be creating, that you would have collaborative nodes, groups, that the project would begin in anthropologists going out and interviewing subjects, bringing it back and creating a Levi-Straussian kind of lab. I just want to say that the reality of such a lab today, my model for it is you create the lab, you go out, you talk to people, but in a variety of subjects. And what you bring back is more powerful than the perspectives that you have, and it destroys your collaboration. Your collaboration dissolves. So that's one interesting model for forming a center that deconstructs. The other one, and I'll end with that, my own comments. I'm sorry if I'm going on too long. I hope it answers some of your questions. If not, I'm indulging myself. So I started out with these 2 people that I do 214 square feet with, and this is just like a firm in the design and business world, although we're not operating for profit, we're not looking for customers. But we do projects together, and we have a history of projects now. Some better than others, but we have a practice, right? And what's interesting, I'm interested in those meta practices. So the idea is that we have all of our previous work to inform our future work. And what's missing from a lot of individual projects is that lack of cumulative experience. It's both plus and minus. So we worked on a project on 214 square feet. So we go to the World Trade Organization, and our realm of thinking and ability to work together, collaboration is a separate node, depends on us being able to share older ideas, not think beyond the box or new every time. So a function of a successful collaboration is the creative repetition of older ideas, which is very different than forming de nouveau, a collaboration in an environment in which you want to think forward. And finally, I end with this. Most of the time, I said this in China, it was kind of shocking, because the Chinese always think in terms, when they think of big projects, the long and glorious past, with theirs of which is longer and more glorious than anybody else in the room. I sort of said, oh, in American anthropology, we don't think about the past anymore. I didn't say this rudely or crudely. I said, young students are dominated with futuristic metaphors for what they're doing. Of course, they have a knowledge of history, but what really dominates their thinking is grounded speculation and a kind of scenario making. But scenario making is something designers do as an exercise. But grounded speculation is what ethnography is supposed to most valuably produce. And we don't have a methodology of that. And what I'm suggesting is some of these things I've been talking about, 2,000 square foot, the conceit of the theater designer against the plodding, wait just a minute, let's figure it out, of the anthropologist, actually that meeting ground of the ragged collaboration is in grounded speculation. And so the Chinese found this, probably because I didn't explain it very well, they found it odd. But let me just, when I was regarding the situation in which we live now, especially in a place like the United States of America, where we think when the public authority says something, we know what it means, and now it's a total mystery. My Chinese friend said, that's a great situation for China. What the expression there is, the only way we know the truth in China is if you keep the bullets flying. So when they have a situation where this one is yelling at that one and the other in the proof, for them, that is a moment, those are moments of truth. And for us, I love the expression, keep the bullets flying. That's the way we can figure out something. Whereas for us, it's total confusion. Sorry for the long answer.